Hello everybody and welcome back to another CB Show Tunes tutorial. Now today what we're going to be getting into is how to basically navigate our scene or move our characters inside our scene by clicking on a specific location. So what we're quickly going to be doing is doing a demonstration on how this works, and then we'll get into how we actually did it. So let's get started. Now the first thing that you want to notice is we have two blue cubes. These of course represent our player. You also have two orange cubes. These represent our enemies. And of course you have these other cubes around the map which represents obstacles. Now we're going to be using a navigation mesh for this, but let's go ahead and just check it out as we do this. So what we do here is we basically left click a player for it to basically select the player. Then we select the location on the map and it moves our character to that position. If we right click an enemy, then of course our player goes and attacks the enemy. Of course, if we want to select another player, we can always select that different player without having it interfere with any of our other players and all, which would be pretty cool. You can also select both players and then of course move them anywhere. And if you want to deselect them both at the same time, then there you go, and it leaves them off to do whatever they want to do. Okay, since the demonstration is over now, we can actually get into how we accomplish this. Now, obviously, the first thing that you're going to need is, say for instance, a cube. This represents our player. Now, I'm going to go and erase all the other cubes that we don't need, and there we go. The next thing that you want to do is set up your scene, which, as you can see, is a very simple scene for me. I basically set up a ground called ground, and of course I dropped in like two hills and a building, and I made sure that all these were static. Okay, this allows us to be able to bake a navigation map, making them all static, so then our character can walk on this navigational mesh without being interfered. Okay, so to bake your navigation mesh, you're going to need to go over to Windows and then find Navigations and click that panel. And it'll open this navigation panel. Now, once you got the navigation panel open, you can simply go ahead and go over to Bake, select Bake, and it will bake this entire area, which of course is what we wanted to do. Make sure that you do have the ground selected for it to actually bake it on the ground, otherwise it will have some issues. Alright, so now since we covered the navigation, I know really fast, if you are more interested inside learning how to do the navigation meshes and all, make sure to leave a comment in the comment section below and I'll actually make a tutorial on that as well. Okay, so back onto this tutorial, and what we're going to do is we're basically going to select our player, so go back over into the inspector, and we're going to add in a nav mesh agent. So this allows us to be able to interact with the navigation mesh. We're also going to select a rigid body, and of course just freeze the rotations just like we would do with any other character. And lastly, we're going to actually create a script called click move. It's a C# script, and we'll get into that as in a second as well. So if you don't know how to create a script, right click, go over to create, and then select C#. You can call it whatever you want to call it. I just, like I said, called it click move, basic description and all. Okay, so the first thing inside the script that you're going to need to do is type in at the very top using unityengine.ai. This is a new version for, I guess, a 2017 version that they came out with. For some reason, the older version decided to go haywire and all. But yeah, you'll need that inside there. Okay, so at the very top, we're going to write a vector3 and call it new position. So this will be our point of, I guess you could call it interest. It allows us to say where our next target's going to be or where our next location's going to be. We also have a public float called speed and then walk range. We'll get more into that once we get down into the code. We also have a nav mesh agent. We called it NM. And of course, that's just simply our navigational mesh. And lastly, we created a public bool called isSelected, deciding whether or not an object is selected or if it's not selected. Okay, so on void start, we're going to say new position is equal to transform.position. That way our current position is equal to that new position, so we don't have to worry about it being equal to null. And then of course it giving us all these errors. Yeah. If you've done this before, you probably know that by now. Okay, so we're also going to get our navigation mesh. So we're going to say nm is equal to get component nav mesh agent. After that, we're going to go and create a void called fixed update. This allows us to mess around with the physics. That's actually what ray casting does. And if you don't know what ray casting is, it's pretty much just allows us to draw a line from whichever object the ray is being cast from to wherever it's going to. So it's very complicated but simple once you actually get to know what it is. Okay, so underneath this, we're going to say raycast hit hit. We're also going to create a ray called ray, and we're going to say it's equal to camera.main.screen point to ray, and it's going to be input.mouse position. So basically, wherever our mouse is, that's where the ray is going to be equal to. Okay, so if you notice this little note, it says left click. So basically, whenever we select the left click, I really could actually erase that because we have it right here instead, but don't worry about it. Anyway, so what you're going to write down is if is selected. So basically, whenever we have our object selected, and inside this equation or function, we're going to say if input.getMouse button down, and we're going to put 0. And this stands for our left mouse button. 1 would stand for right, and of course 2 would stand for the wheel. So just keep that in mind if you're working with your mouse buttons. Okay, inside this function, we're going to say if physics.raycast, then we're going to put a parentheses ray. And we're going to say out hit, so once it hits something, and hit, which is the reference we just called, .transform.name is equal to ground. So say for instance, if we put our mouse over this object, that's not called ground, so it's not going to register as being hit. While if we click on the ground, which of course is right here, then it registers as being hit. Now you could also set this up to be just navigational meshes instead, but I found this a whole lot easier and more useful. Okay, and for the, I guess you could say the result of this equation, we're going to say new position is equal to hit dot point. So now we can say move to this position, and yeah, that's the location. Okay, inside a new function now, outside of this left click and all, we're going to make sure that we write basically a right mouse button attack. So whenever we're inside this, I guess you could say object, then we're going to still be attacking. Or if we're still selected, I mean, Anyway, so what this does is we're going to be using the same equation, but we're going to be changing it from name to tag. And we're going to make the tag equal to enemy. So any form of enemy, we can go and attack by right-clicking. And we're going to put and input.getMouse button down, same thing as before, but we're going to make it 1. And we're going to say new position is equal to hit.point. Same reference, just to the enemy instead of the ground. Now, right here, you could actually put is selected is equal to true. So say, for instance, is selected is equal to true. And it will allow us to stay, how would I put it? It will allow our character to still be selected after attacking, but I personally find it more entertaining to deselect it. It just, for me, makes more sense. So you can actually take your time on instructing your other units and all. So it's really up to you. So anyway, next we're going to put another reference point. So this is actually going to be making our character move. So we're going to say if vector3 dot distance, and inside this function we're going to say new position, which is our first point, and transform dot position, which is our second point, is greater than walk range. So wherever we're going to be moving to, as long as it's within this distance and all, sorry about that. So say for instance 0 allows us to move. 5, say for instance you got to be within 5 units, which I personally don't like. So I always put it at 0 anyway. So inside this we're going to say nm.set destination new position. So now we're moving to that location. We're also going to say transform.lookAt new position. So now we're looking at the new position and we're setting our destination at new position. Now if you want to lerp this or slurp this to the new position and all, you'll have to get into quaternions, which takes so much time. So yeah, if you want to do that, go ahead, but it's not absolutely necessary, especially if you're working with low poly characters. Okay, so outside of this whole is selected, we're going to be creating a new function called if input.get mouse button down, we're going to say 1, then it's going to say is selected is equal to false. Now right here, if you want to keep your character selected whenever you attack, you will have to modify this specific script right here. But if you don't want to change anything that we covered beforehand, then go ahead and leave it as is. And of course, it will just deselect once we have that activated. Okay, and at the way bottom, this right here is actually very important to make sure that you are controlling one character at a time. I spent roughly about 15 minutes coming up with this one thing because it was just too much. So I hope you guys like this hard work that was put into this part. But basically what it's saying is if we're not selected and then physics.raycast, ray, out hit, you know, the same thing as before, and then hit.transform.tag is equal to player. So same thing as the enemy. And of course, we have our left mouse button clicked. Then we're going to say hit.transform.gameObject.getComponent, our reference script, so our current script we're using. And then of course we're going to say is selected is equal to true. So this allows us to be able to select one object or select two objects without moving any individual, or say for instance moving both objects without wanting to. That was actually the big issue I was running into earlier. Okay, so I hope you guys liked this video. If you liked it, please like, subscribe, check out some other videos, and if you have any questions regarding this tutorial or any other tutorials, please leave it inside the comment section below. Also, if you have any form of tutorial that you want to see inside the near future and all, go ahead and request it. I'll be happy to try to answer it or answer any questions and that you guys might have. And of course, I'll see you guys next time.